And this is just a tape replay. In case you might not have seen it the first time around, let's just watch it one more time. And we're just going to play this one more time for you. They're playing it yet again of Jussie Smollett arriving to the courthouse just moments ago with family, with his defense team, with his lawyers as they await the verdict to be read in his case. And then we're going to bring in more expert analysis from former federal prosecutor Doug Burns, and then we will update you right away as to what the jury verdict is.
Sir, you nervous about the outcome of the case? Message to your fans? What are you hoping for the verdict, sir?
And then now that you get the adrenaline going and you get a feel of how that goes, you'll do better as far as angle.
Feel it.
You'll do better as angle.
Yes.
Is concerned.
Yes.
But you want to hang out with this gear here? You could power it down now.
Sure.
All right, and unfortunately, we don't have now any live pictures. We are going to get back to the live picture outside of court and watch Jussie Smollett and his entourage leave once the verdict is read. And so once the verdict is read, we're going to be obviously presenting it, reporting it, talking about it. But let's still bring in former federal prosecutor Doug Burns to discuss all of this. And Doug, we just watched Jussie Smollett enter court with this large entourage like he's been doing each and every day of the trial. What do you think is going through his head right now? You've been in so many different cases and trials. How does a defendant prepare for something like this?
Well, I'm sure he's nervous. It's a tense moment, obviously, and I'm sure the lawyers have read tea leaves to him. You know, he asked the lawyers, what do you think? What does this mean? I mean, again, I've seen a lot of strange things happen, but at the same time, this seemed like a logically progressed, jury deliberation. In other words, they asked, for a chart that broke down sort of a timeline of the events in question, which is very, very normal. They obviously discussed that timeline, back and forth in detail. The amount of time seems entirely logical and reasonable. Very often, a rejection of a case would be quick. That's not a bright line rule, but it's a rule. You come out after an hour and a half, we've reached a verdict. That can be bad news for prosecutors very often, and I've seen that a couple of times over the years. But again, to me, reading tea leaves and, using my crystal ball skills, whatever they may be, it seems like they went through everything. And, as I said earlier, almost undoubtedly are going to reach a guilty verdict, either on all counts or, as you had said, it's a possibility, some type of split off on one or two counts. But again, I didn't see the distinction between counts. Each of the 6 counts, by the way, is the same offense. Not only is it the same label, disorderly conduct, but it's, being untruthful to law enforcement, different iterations. That's why you have 6 of them. So again, this isn't an earth-shaking point, but one conviction on one is, very similar to whether it's on more than one, quite honestly, given the fact that it's such a high-profile celebrity case and so forth. Nobody would claim victory on the defense side, for example, if it were hypothetically a conviction on 1 out of 6. It's still a conviction of a felony count.
And Doug, we're learning from Matt Finn that Smollett is in the courtroom right now after entering with his entourage, his supporters, his team of defense lawyers, and just moments now, the verdict will be read in this case. And right now, though, Doug, stand by. Let's go out to Fox 32 in Chicago for their continuing coverage of this story as well.
Anything about how they feel about this case, that it was just 9 hours?
I don't think so, because even though it was just 9 hours, that's maybe one full day of deliberations. And the trial was a week-long trial. There were a lot of videos played, a lot of testimony from police who interviewed witnesses, the key witnesses themselves, including Jussie Smollett. So I don't think it's unusual, and you can't tell much by the fact they came back within 9.5 hours or so.
So, Lair, as you've been describing and explaining this case to us, it's possible the actor could face up to 3 years in prison. But isn't the general sense that he's more likely to have probation if in fact, it goes that way?
If he's treated like other defendants at 26th in California and in other courthouses around the state of Illinois, a first-time offender who has behaved himself, has shown up for all of his court hearings, never jumped bond or disappeared, and doesn't pose any sort of threat, typically would get probation after a crime like this if he is convicted. And, you know, it's always the tensest moment of all when the verdict is about to be announced, but it's an awful lot more tense when the defendant is facing years or decades in jail. In this case, it pretty much will be whether Jussie Smollett is convicted and gets a fairly light sentence or is set free and gets no sentence at all.
Can you tell us more, walk us back about the charges that he is facing?
Well, they're felony disorderly conduct charges, and each one involves an alleged lie that he told to Chicago police officers. It's kind of like obstruction of justice, but it's a lesser charge in Illinois. And in these cases, the prosecutors allege that in 6 different cases he lied to police, he manufactured that crime, and then he lied to police and denied manufacturing the crime. And it's basically, the case comes down to a he said, they said, because he says there was no manufactured crime, that he was honestly a victim, whereas the 2 Osendero brothers say that, in fact, they were put up to it and they were paid to commit the crime. His alleged motive was that he believed he had received a threatening letter, and his bosses, the Empire producers, had not taken the threats
Larry, let's
against
jump in. Larry,
let's go.
Let me jump in. I think we've got some new information. The judge is in the courtroom. The jurors are there. Let's go to Dane Placco and see if we have the verdict. Dane?
Yeah, I'm waiting on a text to come down from Casey Cronus, our Fox colleague who's up in the courtroom right now. Judge James Lynn walked into the courtroom about 3 minutes ago. The jury has been brought into the courtroom. Judge Lynn opened up by telling everybody to control their emotions regardless of the verdict. And it sounds as though the verdict is being read at this moment. Again, 6 counts of felony disorderly conduct. It's likely they will go through the verdict on each of those counts. Count 1, count 2. Count 1, guilty. Jussie Smollett, guilty of felony disorderly conduct on count 1. And that is just coming down now from the 7th floor of the criminal courthouse. We'll have to hear what his reaction is to that later. We know that he's been fairly stoic during the trial. He looked very stoic as he walked in here just moments ago. But again, count 1, guilty. Jussie Smollett, guilty. And I'm getting another text, count 2, guilty as well. So at least 2 of the 6 counts right now, Jussie Smollett has been found guilty of disorderly conduct, but it's a felony disorderly conduct, and as Larry was just explaining, that does carry a potentially longer prison term of possibly 3 years in prison, although most of the attorneys we talk to say that's not likely. Count 3, guilty again. So on half the counts now, Jussie Smollett has been found guilty. And we're loading up another count right now. Again, Casey Cronus, our new colleague from Fox 32, just joined the station last week, is up in the courtroom on one of the benches. It's an older courtroom, a large courtroom, but capacity very limited up there because of COVID, only 57 people allowed. And we should be getting a 4th count verdict here in just a couple of moments. Count 4, guilty. So again, 4 of the 6 counts so far against Jussie Smollett, he has been found guilty. And it's likely, if I may surmise, that there'll be guilty counts on 5 and 6 as well, because as Larry was saying just moments ago, these counts are all pretty much alike. They're essentially 6 counts for the same crime. And I can say, I don't have to say alleged crime now, I can say crime. Count 5, yes indeed, guilty. They're all the same crime, and that is for lying to a Chicago police officer. There were 3 separate occasions in which he was interviewed by police. Each of those occasions he spoke to 2 officers, and so the way that Dan Webb, the special prosecutor, formulated his case was to charge 2 counts for each of those interactions with police. And now we're loading up the 6th count here. And let me tell you what it's going to be. Again, counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 guilty, and count 6 not guilty. Well, that's a bit of a surprise. So he's guilty on 5 counts and not guilty on a 6th count. However, it's a big win for the special prosecutor's office because they only needed 1 guilty count. They could have been not guilty on 5 counts and guilty on 1, and guilty on 5 is essentially the same thing. So again, Jussie Smollett just found guilty on 5 of the 6 felony disorderly conduct charges he faced in this trial that took about a week and a half here at the Layton Criminal Courthouse. Global scrutiny on this case, both when it happened and here right now. So we're looking forward to hearing what Mr. Smollett's reaction was in the courtroom. We're looking forward to hearing his lawyers.
Uh-oh, we lost Dane for a second. We'll see if he can hear us. We were going to ask him some questions, but if not, let's check in with Larry Yellen. We want to ask about these charges, Larry. Were they all the same? Count 6. What's different? Uh-oh, you're muted.
Okay,
Okay,
hang
there
on
you
a
are.
second.
We hear you now.
We hear
So
you.
what's different about
Okay.
count 6, Larry?
Alrighty. Count 6, I'm not sure which alleged lie that was, but each of these counts was a different statement he gave to police, which prosecutors attempted to prove were false statements. On the 6th statement, and it was just one of the 6, he was found not guilty, but on the other 5, the jury found that he did in fact lie to police, and that's felony disorderly conduct. What's interesting from the juror's point of view is that this suggests that it wasn't a slam dunk. It might explain why it took 9.5 hours. And it also shows that they considered each individual count very closely. And if it had been all 6, you know, people might have said, well, the jurors just went through it quickly and didn't really study the case closely. But the fact that one of them was a not guilty suggests that they took their job very seriously. What's happening in the courtroom now, I would imagine, typically the defense will ask for each of the jurors to be polled individually, and they will be asked, juror number 1, was this and is this your verdict? And the juror will say yes or no. And that's a technicality, but the defense always asks that that be done in these cases. That'll take another 5 minutes or so, and then the judge will likely set a sentencing date. And between now and the sentencing date, there will be a pre-sentence report, an extensive look into Jussie Smollett's past, factors which might have led him to commit these crimes, factors that will mitigate against a long sentence, and that will all take place before the sentencing takes place. Typically, the sentencing would be 2 or 3 months from now.
Hey, Larry, quick question. Having watched the courtroom activity the last week and a half very closely, anything about this surprise you?
I'm never surprised when Dan Webb wins a case. First of all, I should say that. I've been watching Dan Webb since, and I hate to date myself, but back to 1983 when he started prosecuting judges at the Dirksen Federal Building in the Graylord investigation. Webb, the selection of Webb as the lead prosecutor, the special prosecutor in this case, sent a sign that this case was going to be very tough for Jussie Smollett to beat. Secondly, most of the defendants at 26th and Cal, just like those at the Dirksen Building, most of them result in guilty charges when they decide to go to trial, so that doesn't surprise me either. I am a little surprised, and I want to see why they found the one not guilty. If 5 of these were lies that were told to the police officers, you'd think that the jury would have found that, wow, he's just a liar and he was lying about everything. But in one case, they found that he was not guilty. A minor victory that won't make much of a difference in the sentence, I don't think.
So in this case, a lot of
All right, some great legal breakdown there from Fox 32 in Chicago. Let's just put up the tweet we have from Casey Cronus, who was in the courtroom when it was read. The jury finding Jussie Smollett guilty on 5 of 6 counts. And you can see count 1 through 5 guilty, count 6, though, not guilty. That's very interesting, and I want to bring Doug Burns back into this. You know, Doug, why would it just be the 1 count for not guilty? What would go into a decision like that if they are all these disorderly conduct case 4 felony charges?
Yeah, no, you know, I've seen this happen a number of times over the years. I'll give you one practical footnote that I think you'll find interesting. I've seen count 1 be not guilty, and everybody really has their hopes up, only to be deflated when the following counts are guilty. But to your question, which is a good one, no, with the caveat that I don't know the minutia of exactly what that was. I'm going to tell you right now that it's entirely possible that, you know, the particular statements in that particular count may have been, you know, technically more defensible, you know, could be the situation, not as clearly as wrong. But the analysis just rendered by the expert, I guess it was out there, was very strong. And he made some points, you know, that I was making and would reiterate, which is that 5 out of 6 as a practical legal matter, as a matter of legal fundamentals, is not going to make any difference at all. And then is an ironic nuance point, which I think everyone will find interesting. And the ironic nuance point is that a finding of not guilty on count 6 actually can hurt him, Smollett, on appeal. Isn't that interesting? Because, and I think the legal expert, I guess it was Mr. Yellen, touched on that. The point is, this claim of, oh, the jury just rubber stamped and so on goes right out the window. And in the brief in the Court of Appeals, the state is writing the jury conscientiously differentiated out each count. And as you saw that reflected in their painstaking arrival of a not guilty on the 6th count. The bottom line, and it is ironic, is that that could actually hurt him a little bit on appeal.
And, you know, Doug, let's talk next steps. Of course, we were talking about the avenues for appeal that are open to Jussie Smollett, but also the sentencing phase now as well. What do you think that is going to be? Now we can no longer call this an alleged hate crime hoax. Indeed, a jury found that it was a hoax, and those counts of disorderly conduct convicting Smollett on them. But as far as sentencing goes, what does your gut tell you? What would a judge be thinking right now?
Well, no, it's a great question. I mean, that's the logical question. I mean, first of all, what happens tonight and tomorrow and everything else is everyone starts wearing around their neck, as some lawyers that I know like to say, you know, the idea, as you put it very well, you know, no more alleged hoax, this and that. You know, a jury has found that he was untruthful when he said it wasn't a hoax and so on. And that stings badly on the defense side. Now, sentencing, though, here is fascinating because you have the confluence of public relations and media at law, whereas in the ordinary case, meaning of no great notoriety, which is the vast, vast majority of cases, you don't have the media dynamic, you don't have a public relations dynamic. Why do I say that? Because in the day-to-day case, a person in this situation, much more likely than not to come in and say, okay, I do apologize for my conduct. I do want to show remorse, etc. But that's pretty much foreclosed. And I have to think about this a little more myself because the verdict just happened. But that's kind of foreclosed by this notion of, you know, maintaining that. You know, I've seen defendants time and time again for years and years and years say, you know, all right, the jury found me guilty, but I'm not guilty. I didn't do this. Okay. They may have found me guilty. That's fine. It's unfair and so on. So my roundabout answer, I apologize to your very good question, is that I don't think that he's going to show remorse. Okay. You know, when he goes before the court for sentencing, I think he'll be very quiet and he won't say a lot.
All right, Doug, we're going to just keep you on standby here. We're taking a live look. Well, we just lost that live look, unfortunately, but that is outside of the courthouse as we now are going to await Jussie Smollett and his team and their exit. And, of course, they'll have to report back to court for the sentencing phase as well. And that's what we were talking with Doug Burns about. Let's get back into Fox 32 Chicago's great coverage of this. They're speaking with Fox 32's Dane Placco about now reaction and fallout. Jussie Smollett found guilty on 5 of the 6 disorderly conduct counts.
He was found not guilty of count 6. I looked that up, and it is him telling a detective, Robert Graves, that he had been a victim of aggravated battery. So that one he's not guilty on. The other counts 1 through 5, were his telling various officers that he had been a victim of this crime.
And that may suggest that the jury didn't believe Detective Graves in the manner that he reported the story, or if Graves had testified, Graves' demeanor on the stand maybe wasn't believable. But in any case, the key factor here is that 5 out of 6 he was found guilty. And as Dane's pointed out, there will be a pre-sentence investigation that'll be done, I believe, by the probation department. They will look at everything in his past, what merits a longer sentence versus a shorter sentence. Those are not made public. They are discussed in court at the time of sentencing, but it's not something that will typically be released to the public or to the news media. And I was curious whether or not they set a sentencing date or if they're going to wait and see how long that investigation takes. One thing we haven't discussed yet, Dane pointed out that the defense lawyers will be coming down. I would not be surprised at all if they announced their intent to appeal this jury finding, and they were upset during the trial at the judge's demeanor. You may recall a couple of days ago, one of the defense lawyers broke down in tears and claimed that Judge Lynn had lunged at her during a sidebar outside the presence of the jury, and she had never seen a judge do that. She also claimed that the judge had been smirking or not taking some of the cross-examination questions by defense lawyers seriously, and indicating that with his facial expressions. All of this will go into a defense appeal of this case. It'll go to an appellate court in Illinois, and it may be more than a year before we eventually find out if the jury's verdict is upheld or overturned by an appellate court.
So in your estimation, it's maybe a long time before we really get this thing finished?
Well, he'll be sentenced, and it's possible if he just gets probation, the appeal won't be that significant. But right. In order to clear his name, say for example he's put on probation, which a lot of us expect, while he's serving that probation, his appeal will still go forward, and he could be seeking to clear his name with that appeal. Sure. On the other hand, he may just decide to let the whole thing drop. But the sense I get from his defense team, from their statements, is that they don't believe he got a fair trial from this judge, and they will be seeking to overturn it regardless of what the sentence is.
All right, Larry, you were cut off a little bit earlier, but you were trying to explain, in addition to this sentence of possible probation, how he has to pay anyone back. Is there restitution in the case?
Well, the city is trying to recover the dollars that were spent with all the police who investigated the case, the overtime that went into it, the amount of money that the city invested. I forget what the exact dollar figure was, but the city wants to get that money back, and they will they're pursuing that right now, I believe, in a case, a federal case, which is on hold at the Dirksen Federal Building until they saw how this trial came out. Now that he's been convicted, I think that will impact the city's decision to go forward, and they will probably try and recover those dollars. Mayor Rahm Emanuel at the time and then Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson were just furious that they had been duped into pouring thousands of dollars worth of resources into this investigation, which they later determined to be a hoax.
We should also mention, as you talk about that, we did reach out to Chicago police for some sort of a reaction or response. They have yet to respond to our inquiry. Right now, we want to head back to the Layton Criminal Courts building and talk to Dane Placco once again. Dane, what are you seeing?
Yeah, and we're continuing to get text messages from Casey Cronus up in the courtroom on the 7th floor. She says that they're still in the courtroom. The lawyers and the judge are still in the courtroom, tying up loose ends, I should say, setting hearings going forward. This is important. Now, the judge ruled that Smollett will be kept on a recognizance bond, which is what he was on before. So they're not going to ask him to put any more money onto a bond now that he's been found guilty, and they're certainly apparently not going going to take him into custody at this point. The lawyers are consulting over a date to set on Zoom to discuss post-trial motions. It apparently will be next month. They're going to Zoom, I'm reading now, on January 27th for post-trial motions. So Smollett and his family still in the courtroom. Court proceedings winding down right now, and we should be seeing them come down in the next few minutes, I would guess. Adding to Larry's point, I can tell you, based on some of the trial testimony, this was the city of Chicago is going to make the argument that this was expensive for them to cover, to put all this manpower into a hoax. The lead detective in the case testified last week that the department had put 3,000 man-hours into its investigation, looking of the initial report of a racial and homophobic attack against Jussie Smollett. And if you do the simple math of police officers making anywhere from $50 to $70 an hour, that's close to $200,000 in taxpayer dollars. So it will be interesting to see whether the city tries to recoup that. Of course, Mr. Smollett has a legal team of 6 well-known established lawyers, so one would imagine, given the amount of time they've poured into this case, he's probably spent at least that and probably considerably more in mounting a defense. So, again, we're in the lobby of the Layton Criminal Courthouse. Still some activity going on in the courtroom upstairs. Now, I just got the note from Casey. Court is adjourned, and she is going to be heading down here now, as presumably will be some of the players in this case. Will be interesting to talk to Casey and get a little bit more play-by-play from her as to exactly how...
All right, that was Dane Placco, Fox 32 Chicago. As we continue our coverage right now, I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks so much for joining us here today. A busy afternoon and evening, especially in Chicago at 26th in California. Jussie Smollett guilty on 5 of the 6 charges there. I do want to bring in once again a friend of Live Now from Fox, Doug Burns, joining us here. Thank you again for being here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it. Great. Well, can you also, I was thinking about when all this was happening, so we got the 5 out of 6 now counts of guilty. Is there a chance that there could be some federal charges because he attempted to say that there was a hate crime when there wasn't?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, interesting observation, but I don't think that it'll come down to that, because it's kind of interesting. They have what they call a PETIT policy, to get in the weeds a little bit, PETIT, which says that, you'll bring a second federal case if substantial rights went unvindicated. So, in simple English, I'm not so sure that they're going to think, the DOJ, main justice, that, there was any big injustice. So I don't anticipate that, but it's an interesting thing to raise and think about.
Yeah, and so we learned a little bit from Dane Placco's reporting there, just a little bit, that the next type of really hearing that we'll have via Zoom late January. Now, what happens from now until then?
Not really all that much. I mean, basically, and you heard some of the other experts explaining it clearly, they have to write up a pre-sentence investigation report. A report like that is in 3 or 4 parts: the person's background, their upbringing, where they went to school. Then you'll have their job history. In this case, there's a celebrity dynamic there, but that's not so relevant necessarily. So, your background, your job, your financial situation, down to the X's and O's, bank accounts, stock accounts, other accounts. And then your criminal history is the 4th one. In this case, I don't believe he has any criminal history. And then the report will give the judge, some guidance as to what the probation department thinks about the severity of the offense, the overall circumstances. So that'll be prepared between now and January. Then in the January meeting, I guess they were saying it's a Zoom meeting, they're going to talk about some scheduling for post-trial motions. That's just very standard, fundamental stuff. They have the right to make certain, motions, a motion ostensibly, for a new trial, things along that nature. But then ultimately a sentencing date will be set and he'll be sentenced. And then some of the questions that kick in will be, if he receives a non-incarceratory sentence, then maybe he won't really pursue it all that much. But you do have sort of legacy and celebrity legacy on the line. So that's a little hard to predict. If he gets a prison term, then there'd be a couple of big issues. The big one is, does he get to remain on bail pending the outcome of an appeal? And that's something that's hotly contested. And generally speaking, and it's a common sense point, if it's a relatively short term, it's more likely that you remain free, on the theory that if it got set aside on appeal, you've already done the sentence. Whereas in reverse, in a super serious case with, let's say, a 10-year mandatory minimum, and the guy gets 20 years, then they may say, well, he's going to have to serve the time now. So I would anticipate, crystal ball, that he'd be allowed to remain free pending appeal. Then you'll have the appeal, and then you'll have the appeal decision.
All right, and what are your thoughts? So 5 out of 6 on the guilty. What do you think would come from sentencing? Are we looking at probation? Or are we looking at some possible time?
That's an interesting question, because I've been saying all throughout, and I've heard other experts say it, and it's an important point, and that is that, you read a lot of media articles, and they all said universally, and it was fine, and it was accurate, that, the experts out there are saying that in a case like this, for a first offender with no criminal history, you would expect probation, non-prison term. But then kicks in an interesting dynamic, which is that if the judge feels that he did lie, that's no minor matter. I mean, if you get up on the witness stand, take an oath, raise your right hand, and you're not truthful, and the judge finds that, makes a finding, the judge could take that into account. And for that reason, you could be bringing into play a short prison term. It's hard to say. I can't really handicap that with any great accuracy, but my generic point I'm trying to make is that what ordinarily, had he not taken the stand, let's put it that way, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, has every right to get up, testify, etc. But had he not, as a practical matter, he wouldn't have faced the possibility, is my point, that a judge could say, the court is finding that you were not truthful in your testimony. That amounts to perjury, and the court is taking that into account in your sentence, etc. So, him getting up there puts a little bit of a wrinkle into the sentencing analysis.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your insight right here. What I want to do now for our viewers that continue to watch here from around the country and around the world, I want to go back out to Fox 32 Chicago. We're learning a little bit more of what Jussie Smollett's reaction was inside of the courtroom when those guilty counts were coming down. Let's listen.
Said that court was adjourned, and that's when the attorneys and the judge went back into chambers.
And to describe the scene in the courtroom, it's a fairly large courtroom, as we were saying before. Several rows of old wooden benches, mostly filled with media. But the front row on the right side was all Jussie Smollett's family and a couple of his supporters. You say that when the verdict was read, you didn't see them react in any way.
A lot of them were looking straight ahead, trying not to really give off much of a reaction, it seemed. Again, the judge did say, to control their emotions if they needed to step out of the courtroom, but really very quiet. I mean, not a peep from the family or from Jussie himself. The only thing we did hear Jussie say was when the judge asked if he understood, he said, I do understand.
Any reaction from any of those parties on the not guilty verdict?
No. I mean, really no reaction at all from anyone who was there in the courtroom. It was quite stoic and silent. So we hope to hear from his team as they head down and perhaps get a better idea of what's going through their minds.
Okay, again, we're waiting for everybody to come down from the courtroom, hoping to hear from Mr. Smollett himself. We think we're going to hear from a family member. We don't know if Smollett is going to speak. We'll certainly hear from the attorneys on both sides. Back to you.
All right, Dane, I wanted to ask Casey a question. Thank you for that. Casey, usually in cases like this, they do poll the jury. The defense often asks for that. I've seen that in a lot of cases. Did they poll the jury and ask them one by one, read with a verdict?
They did. Once the verdict was read, the defense team asked for the jury to be polled. At that time, they did ask each jury member what if that indeed was their verdict. They all agreed. They nodded, and that's when the jury members were then dismissed.
Have you seen them come down yet?
The jury was taken out, we believe, a side entrance. We were told that they would be escorted to their vehicles by deputies, extra deputies, we were told. And the judge did ask jury members not to speak to the media until they were off this property, actually, saying, wait until you get to your cars. After you get to your cars, then you're free to speak as you wish.
Just so you know, the setup here, they're parking in a garage across the street, like a multi-level 5-story, I believe, garage on the other side of California, which is part of the Cook County property. So presumably we may not be able to have an opportunity to ask any of the jurors any questions until later this evening.
Yeah, when I was leaving the courtroom, I had to wait a moment because the jury members were being escorted out, and they did not take the main elevator bank down. So they were taken a different way. Not sure if they've already left the building, but again, the judge said that they would have extra deputies escorting them to their vehicles to make sure they actually got into their cars safely and could be on their way.
What's interesting is you said Judge Lynn commended the jury, said he thought they did a good job. Was it in such a manner that it made it sound as though he agreed with their verdict?
You know, it's hard to tell. He did say that he thought this trial was very fair. He made sure to say that. He thought it was very fair and that they were very fair and impartial. He commended them for taking notes, for showing up on time every day, and of course a lot of long days with the jury staying till 7 or 8 o'clock for several days last week. So
yeah, they were getting here about 8:30 in the morning, starting about 9:15 and going till 8 o'clock and even later on a couple of occasions. So the judge pushed them very hard on this particular case. He wanted to get it done in less than a week. It turns out it took about a week and a half to get it done.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Dane Placco and Casey Cronus, thank you for your coverage. Stay tuned. We'll be back to you in just a few minutes. Again, the main headline here, Jussie Smollett found guilty on 5 of 6 counts. Let's take a break right now from this, and shall we talk some weather?
Yes, let's check in with Chief Meteorologist.
As they go to weather right there, we're going to stay right here on the guilty accounts there. 5 out of 6 for actor Jussie Smollett there in this hoax hate crime trial that really captivated the country when it was first being really talked about and described. People immediately, it seemed like, all went into the corner there for Jussie Smollett. But then facts in the case started to come out, and things just didn't seem to add up for a lot of people. And you remember, it was almost like a war on Twitter and war on social media. With it highly turned politicized because we had the "Make America Great Again" hat all in the mix here, and so it was left versus right on Twitter for much of the early stages. And then when you got some of the facts there, it just didn't start to add up. And Chicago police then coming out a couple days after, a week after, and saying, this really doesn't look like anything that really happened. It looks more like it was all made up there. And this is where we are right now, coming to a conclusion. A long way to get here, but this is the way that it wraps up right here. We do have shots now. Podium set up right there, 26th in California, the courthouse. They're awaiting some remarks. Who knows who could come up to the podium? That's why we invite everyone to always stay with us right here on Live Now from Fox. As we are hoping that maybe the prosecution, maybe the defense. We don't think Jussie Smollett will come to the podium. He hasn't really been talking that much, and who's going to want to talk about with the 5 out of 6 counts there of guilty. But we continue to bring you these live images right here on Live Now from Fox. Let me just describe a little bit of these different counts and what they mean. Again, 5 out of 6 found guilty, the 1 not guilty. So these are the counts that were against him. Count 1 accused him of telling and responding a Chicago police officer at around 2:45 a.m., some 45 minutes after the purported attack, that he was the victim of a hate crime. He said 2 attackers put a rope around his neck, Count 2 refers to Smollett telling the same officer he was a victim of a battery, describing attackers beating and pouring bleach on him. Counts 3 and 4 are when Smollett made the same claims but to a different officer, Kimberly Murray, later that morning at just before 6 a.m. See, the lies continued to roll on there as the morning progressed. Count 5 accuses Smollett of telling the officer at around 7:15 later in the day that he was the victim of a battery. Count 6 refers to Smollett reporting on February 14th, 2019 to the detective that he'd been a victim of an aggravated battery there as well. So those were the counts that he was charged with, and we were talking about just this timeline and just how far in the making this all comes. We're going to give you a little bit of timeline of everything that happened right here, and always going to break it down. We're going to throw out all our breaks right now. We're going to stay in this coverage just because we don't want to miss anybody coming to this podium right now, and of course we'll monitor everything here for you. But I want to give you almost a little timeline of how we got here on this day, on this Thursday. So let's just break down some of the timeline of events right now. Static shot right here. If you're just joining us here on Live Now from Fox, we appreciate you joining us here. All right, so here is the breakdown. It all goes back, let's go back in time right now to 2019, everybody. Jussie Smollett received a racist and homophobic threatening letter at the studio in Chicago where Empire is filmed. Police later say they believe Smollett sent the letter to himself. Now let's go to January 29, 2019. I'm just looking right here at our camera because it looked like the photographer was maybe trying to get someone's attention. We'll wait on that right there. January 29th, everyone. Jussie Smollett tells police he was attacked by two men in downtown Chicago at 2 a.m. The actor says the men used racist and homophobic slurs, wrapped a rope around his neck, and poured an unknown substance on him. Police say Smollett, who is black and gay, told detectives the attackers also yelled he was in MAGA country, an apparent reference to President Donald Trump's Make America Great Again campaign slogan that some Trump critics called racist and discriminatory. And we're continuing to take a look here of the different angles right here on Live Now from Fox as we continue to bring you this breaking news. We go now to January 30th of 2019. Chicago police say they've reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance camera footage, including of Smollett walking downtown, but none shows the attack. Police obtain and release images of two people they want to question, calling them persons of interest. Reports of an assault on Smollett drew outrage and support for him on social media from some politicians and celebrities. January 31st, Smollett's family issues a statement calling the attack a hate crime and disputing claims that he changed his story. February 1st, Smollett issues a statement saying he's okay, that he's working with authorities and has been 100% factual and consistent on every level. February 2nd, the very next day, Smollett opens a concert in West Hollywood, California with an emotional speech saying he had to play the show because he couldn't let the attackers win. February 13th, Chicago police pick up two brothers at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport after police learn at least one worked on Empire. Police question the men who are returning to Chicago from Nigeria and search their apartment. February 15th, 2019, Chicago police released the brothers without any charges after arresting them on suspicion of assault and holding them for nearly 48 hours. A police spokesperson says they're no longer suspects. Okay, well, we're getting some movement now inside of the courtroom. Live look right now of the courthouse, I should say. Looks like we are going to have a statement. Let's listen right here. This is the prosecution.
You all ready? So during my closing argument, I told the jury that I thought the evidence was overwhelming, that in fact Mr. Smollett had faked a hate crime and then lied to the police about it, and then compounded his crimes by lying to the jury during the course of this trial and insulting their intelligence. That's what I told the jury in my closing argument. With the resounding verdict we just received from this jury after one day of deliberations, in which they found Mr. Smollett guilty of virtually all charges of doing exactly what we said he did, of reporting a fake crime to the Chicago Police Department as a real crime. That verdict was a resounding message by the jury that in fact Mr. Smollett did exactly what we said he did. And what I think is important about this verdict is that a lot of you from Chicago know that it was a couple years ago when the court system came to me and wanted me to become special prosecutor because there was a feeling that things that had happened in the past, that there never was a public trial, and that this controversial events that occurred regarding Mr. Smollett and what he did to this city and what he did to the Chicago Police Department never had a chance to put it in front of a jury and let a jury decide, after hearing all the evidence, whether what Mr. Smollett was right or wrong, because it's very controversial. I agreed to do that because I felt it was also important for the Cook County judicial system to get a trial. Whether we won or lost the trial was not the issue. What was the issue is that what Mr. Smollett had done in this city should be aired in front of a public trial where all the evidence that comes out, all the talk on social media may or may not be true, but the true facts, I thought, needed to come out, and we did it. And we became special prosecutors, and the rest is history. We've now won this case, and I want to point out that there's an enormous effort was put in when I agreed to take the special prosecutor role. That meant that my law firm became special prosecutors, and the men and women around me right now in the last 2.5 years have worked so hard to develop the evidence, present it to a grand jury, go through a pandemic, wait to get a trial, which we wanted, and finally in the last 10 days, these lawyers have had a chance to present this evidence to a jury, and we've come away with the jury agreeing that they should have heard the case, and in fact he was guilty. Thank you very much. Questions?
Could you just confirm for everyone what that 6 charges that he was found not guilty of?
Yeah, the 6th count, well, I'm not going to speculate on why a jury did that, but that 6th count was an event that occurred 2 weeks after the event. So the other false statements were made to the police right on the day of January 29th on 3 different interviews, and that counted for 5 of the 6 counts, which he was found not guilty in every one of those. The 6th count was 2 weeks later, on February 13th, at a police station, and it may be because it was after the event. I don't know what the reason was. It wasn't that significant to our case, and has no impact on the case whatsoever. Yeah. It was, yeah, so the answer is yes, you're right. It was the aggravated battery, which means that there has to be a mask, and we charged that because the police officer testified that that's when Smollett told the police officer he was a mask. But whatever the reasons are, this jury, by the way, this jury worked so hard, and for Mr. Smollett to get up in front of them and lie for hours and hours and hours, that really compounded his misconduct. And quite frankly, when I saw that happen in the courtroom, at least for me, as a trial lawyer that spent my life in the courtroom, we don't expect defendants to do that. Defendants have a right to go to trial. Defendants have a right to argue that their case has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But defendants do not have the right to go in front of a jury and lie under oath. Mr. Smollett would not have lost this case, as he did today, unless the jury found that he lied to them. And so that was something that I was very proud that this jury came to the conclusion that he's guilty, and the fact that he came up with a completely ridiculous story to explain his misconduct did not apparently have an impact on the jury's verdict.
How does the perjury charge be handled at this point?
Pardon me, I'm sorry?
How do you handle that? That is perjury. How do you handle that at this point?
Well, first of all, I don't know the answer to that question. I will say that over the years, if someone is convicted in a court of law by a jury, normally follow-up perjury charges do not normally occur. That's just the way it is. But I'm not going to predict what's going to happen here. We just got the verdict 30 minutes ago, and let's see what happens.
Dan, in all honesty, any disappointment in not getting all 6?
No. I mean, I don't. I mean, look, the fact that you put in 6 counts or 16 counts, when someone is found guilty of 5 out of 6 counts, it has no impact on our case whatsoever and is insignificant.
Why did you push for vindication for the Chicago Police Department?
So I would like to, that's a good question. Thank you for asking the question. You heard me in my closing argument. I talked to them about what I said into my closing argument is that for Mr. Smollett in this city, with this police department, to have reported this crime on January 29th, you saw what this city did. A lot of times people say, well, police officers sweep things under the rug. This police department responded by absolutely testifying in this trial that they took it seriously, they believed it was the victim of a crime, and they worked so hard for the next 3 weeks. You saw 26 Chicago police officers spent 3,000 hours of time costing the city well over $100,000 for a fake crime that never occurred. And by the way, a fake crime that denigrates what a real hate crime is. And to use these meanings and symbols that are so abhorrent in our society, it's clear why the police would take it seriously. And they did. When Detective Thies described, he was working 36 hours with no sleep, and so were other police officers, because they had to trudge through these communities and get doorbells that had these cameras on it, and the work they did was extraordinary. So I have told the jury that what happened here was so wrong for the Chicago Police Department. And by the way, maybe the Chicago Police Department is not perfect, but I'll tell you this. What they did on this case was extraordinary police work, and the fact that this jury convicted him on virtually all counts was based on testimony from Chicago police officers and the 2 Osendero brothers, and I believe it's a complete vindication of everything the Chicago Police Department did to thoroughly and conscientiously investigate this case.
How much did your work cost the county?
0. Thank you for asking.
No additional cost?
None. So when we took this case, the county pays a standard amount of money each day or each hour. You get paid on the hour. Special prosecutors are paid. When I told Judge Tooman I would do it, I talked to my law firm, and we made the decision, if you're going to do this, then just do it for the public. I was asked for my firm to try to help restore the lack of confidence in the criminal justice system because what happened here. That's why Judge Tooman reached out to us, and I told him, we're going to do it. After we made the decision to do it, I told Judge Tooman we're going to do it, and we're not going to charge anything. So there's been, well, there might be out-of-pocket expenses of a few dollars. The answer is we did it for nothing. We did it pro bono, and we did it because we thought it was the right thing to do.
Mr. Webb, what does this verdict say about State's Attorney Kim Foxx's decision, or her office's decision, to drop the charges now that you have this guilty verdict on 5 of 6?
Well, the events, I was appointed a special prosecutor because Judge Tooman believed that the circumstances under which the Smollett case was dismissed without a trial was not supported by the evidence. That's why I agreed to take on the case. When I agreed to take on the case, I agreed to evaluate the evidence to decide whether he should be reindicted. It took me 4 months of work, but I decided 4 months later that I thought the evidence was overwhelming, that he had committed serious crimes, and I reindicted him. But then I had to go to trial and prove it. And my position is I wanted a public trial and let a jury decide. Now that they've decided that Smollett should have been convicted, I believe that we in the Special Prosecutor's Office made the right decision to reindict him. We made the right decision to take it to trial, and we got a verdict that is obviously a resounding success for us. I'm not going to make comments about that. What happened speaks for itself. Any other questions? Well, I can't hear you.
What kind of sentence should he get?
Well, that sentence is an issue. He just got convicted 30, 40 minutes ago, so let's wait and see. We happen to have in this case, one thing that I am proud of is that this court says, I'm not we're strangers over here at 26th Street, okay? And we came over here, and the court system has done an extraordinary job. They assigned Judge Lynn, who I didn't even know Judge Lynn before this trial, who did an extraordinary job during this trial. This trial got heated. If you all had been back in chambers for a lot of the arguments we had back and forth with each other, this was a difficult trial for any trial judge. Judge Lynn did an extraordinary job, and quite frankly, the fact that the court system kind of opened its doors to us as special prosecutor, didn't look at us as outsiders, but kind of opened the doors and said, come on over, try your case, you're going to get a fair trial, and we did. And Judge Lynn did an extraordinary job, and quite frankly, he's one of the finer judges I've had the chance to practice in front of.
Is there any evidence in particular that you think stuck with this jury?
Well, there's two things that I think stuck with the jury. Number one, I think my basic argument that it is ridiculous to think that Smollett left his apartment on the night of January 29th at 2 o'clock in the morning to go buy eggs, and that's his explanation for why he ended up right at that intersection, right at 2 o'clock in the morning, that the brother said is where he told them the attack should take place. So the fact that it actually happened that way, I think, was pretty profound. I also think that sometimes it's simple things. He actually rigged that rope. After that rope got put on him, I showed the picture to the jury. Pictures don't lie. Those pictures showed that he actually, after he went through this fake attack, wanted to make it look better, and he jimmied with the rope to make the noose look closer to his throat and rustled around, because the rope, you saw it in the courtroom, was nice and neat around his neck, because Ola Ossendero didn't have time to do much with it because a car came. And so he ran away. He left the rope next to his face. Smollett got up, put it around his neck, and then when it didn't look bad enough, he changed it, and I think that impacted the jury. That's what I think.
Mr. Webb, you said that it was unexpected for him to get up on the stand and to lie and lie and lie like that. You spent your lifetime in a courtroom. What do you think was behind that?
I'm not going to speak. I mean, well, let me say this. First of all, Mr. Smollett has a right to present any defense he wants. I just told you that I don't think that lying under oath is acceptable for a defendant. Defendants have a right to defend themselves on the grounds that they haven't been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And they have a right to do that. I don't think they have a right to go on the stand and lie under oath. And so it happened, and I think this will probably be a point that I'll make at sentencing, that not only did Mr. Smollett lie to the police and wreak havoc here in this city for weeks on end for no reason whatsoever, but then he compounded the problem by lying under oath to a jury, which I think should not take place, and I don't expect that to happen in court of law. I just don't.
If he doesn't show any sympathy, remorse, let alone an apology, should that affect the sentencing?
No, that's up to the judge to decide. The judge is the one that gets to decide sentencing, and we'll let the judge decide sentencing issues. Anyway,
some big cases. Where does this Class 4 felony case fit?
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your question.
You've had some big cases in your career. Where does this Class 4 felony fit in the grand?
Well, I've had a lot of big cases, and this is a big case. By the way, I took this case because I actually thought if it was true that he lied to the Chicago Police Department about something like a hate crime, when we've got all of these social issues in our country, we're trying to make sure that we do the right thing when these kind of bad things have happened, for him to fake a hate crime, fake it, and then cause the police department to spend enormous efforts taking him off of homicide cases and putting him on this case. I thought that was bad conduct. I mean, it was not insignificant. I thought it was serious criminal misconduct that needed to be approached and have a public trial about it. Now that he's compounded his wrongdoing by lying to a jury, which they've obviously determined from the verdict today, he's compounded his misconduct in this city, and we'll let the judge decide what to do.
Should he reimburse the police department?
Well, that's an issue for sentencing. There's an issue that's always at sentencing about restitution. That'll be a decision that Judge Lynn will get to make. You all have a nice day. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Special prosecutor there, Dan Webb, wrapping up, talking to the media there and calling Jussie Smollett a liar that has now been convicted in this fake hate crime that has really garnered the attention of so many people. Let's go out now to more coverage. Fox 32 Chicago with detailed analysis.
From Jussie Smollett or any significant punishment. That was the way it was viewed at the time. Dan Webb, I think, he did point out, I remember I was at the press conference where he was appointed, and he pointed out at that time that his law firm would not be charging a dime to the county for their work. So when he was asked that question, I wasn't surprised that he said this entire prosecution
I'm going to interrupt you in a minute, Larry, because the defense team is walking into the Layton Criminal Court building, and we want to hear from them as well. We have been listening to Special Prosecutor Dan Webb give us his view on why he re-indicted Smollett, and we understand that Jussie Smollett's team is walking up. The Osundero brothers' attorney is walking up, we understand, Larry. Let's listen.
My clients, Ola and Bola Osundero, could not be more thrilled and pleased with the result today. We honor and respect the jury's outcome, but understand that there is a lot of healing that needs to happen. First and foremost, there is one unsung hero in all of this, and my clients really want to make sure she gets the credit she deserves, and that is retired Judge Sheila O'Brien. Without the judge, we don't have the Office of the Special Prosecutor. We don't have people being held accountable. We don't have the verdict that we have today. So wherever you are, Judge O'Brien, my clients and myself, we thank you. We thank you for having the guts to file that motion seeking an appointment of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Without your guts and without your gumption, we would not be here today having this closure. So thank you. With respect to the Office of the Special Prosecutor, if you remember, nobody wanted this case. None of the other state's attorneys wanted this case. None of the other appellate state's attorneys in the state of Illinois wanted this case. And yet Chief Judge Tooman found Winston and Strom, and thank God that he did. And he appointed Dan Webb. Dan Webb and his team, especially Sean Weiber and Sam Mendenhall, deserve so much credit. I understand that they did this pro bono. The hours that they put into this case would astound you. The preparation that they had to go through. And I know particularly Sam Mendenhall was here in this building on his birthday. Anniversaries were missed, recitals were missed, so that we would be prepared and ready to go this last week of trial. So to the Office of the Special Prosecutor, my clients and I personally thank you for taking us across the finish line. To the media, to all of you guys, to the reporters in this building right here, you did a phenomenal job. You guys got it right. To the national media out there who just ran with this story, let's turn down the sensationalism and let's turn up the journalism. You have great role models right here, sitting right here. A lot of people's names were dragged through the mud during this trial. Let's just stop. Let's just leave them alone. Even if they're part of a major network, let's just leave them alone. Let's heal from this. To the Chicago Police and the Chicago Police Department that was assigned specifically to this case, you guys.
All right, we've been listening to Gloria Schmidt-Rodriguez, the attorney for the Osundero brothers. And let's go back to Larry Yellen once again. And Larry, I wanted to get your take on some of the other topics that Dan Webb hit on during his 10 or 12 minutes in front of the microphone there, especially how somebody asked, what was it that resonated most with the jury, do you think? And he went through a couple specific points. What'd you make of that?
Well, first of all, I have to admit it's difficult since this trial was not televised and since I wasn't in the courtroom to analyze exactly what were the most significant points. It's a lot easier to do it when I'm sitting in one of those benches and watching the jury react. But from the coverage and from the descriptions of the testimony, I think
All right, folks, we are going to continue in 26th and California right now as we continue to listen right now to the attorney for the two brothers there.
Love you for. Humans are forgiving. People will forgive you. It is time to cut the act. Just come clean. What I know of you in the almost last 3 years of this case, what I personally know of you, interacting with you in the court proceedings throughout the last year, is that you're a warm person. You seem to be a generous person. You always greeted me and my staff. I appreciate that. And I personally forgive you. And I know many other people will too. I don't speak for Ola and Bola on that. They are going to address you when they're ready, Mr. Smollett. But I personally forgive you. Did I forget anything? My clients also wanted to thank Judge Lynn for his professionalism during this trial and for the entire proceedings. This has not been an easy case for him to try, and he did an outstanding job. His courtroom staff deserve a lot of credit. This was a very difficult, logistically difficult trial to have, and they did an amazing job. The deputies and the sheriffs, I know it was crazy. We really appreciate the professionalism. I will take a few questions, and then my client will make a very, very brief statement, and then we'll call it a day.
Since 2019, you said you were going to cooperate. You said your clients were going to cooperate with this, whatever it took to get to this point. The brother's name was dragged in court, like you said. What does it mean to you, to your clients, that the jury agreed with the brothers?
I want to be very clear when I say the brothers, even though they're satisfied with the result and they knew that they had the expectation that this would be the result, there is still a part of them that is hurting. Remember that when I said they would cooperate, that was still knowing that they regretted their role in this. They regretted from the start their role in all of this incident. So they're at least grateful they can put this behind them.
Did Bola not want to be here?
Bola, actually, thank you for reminding me. He's going to be fighting tonight with USA Boxing. He's down in Shreveport, Louisiana. He's been aware. We've been calling and texting him this whole time. He won his fight last night, so he would love to have been here, but we haven't been able to clone him just yet.
Do you feel like there's anything he would want to clarify after this trial and his name was dragged all this?
Absolutely, Matt. Bola and Ola they'll tell their story when they're ready. This venue is more for you guys, and it's more on your terms. They want to be able to say their story on their terms, and that will happen very soon.
Can I ask you about what the prosecution and then the defense after Mr. Alcendario, both of them? So they called them all sorts of names and said all sorts of different things about how they reacted to that and what you thought of that sort of defense.
The question was, how did Ola and Bola react to their name being dragged in the mud? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when it's on a national and international stage. It doesn't feel good when it's at the local high school. Nobody likes that. But it is what it is when it comes to litigation. We understand that Mr. Smollett had to put on the case he had to put on. It's unfortunate that they had to do it in this fashion. I certainly wouldn't have done it that way, but it's time to heal. Bill, did you have a question?
Well, I want to ask you about, do you anticipate any legal action against Mr. Smollett as we move forward?
The question was any legal action against Mr. Smollett, I assume by the Alcendario brothers. Yes. We're not even there. That's a problem for another day. We're so tired. These have been long days and hours. I personally still have a practice to run. I have a little baby at home that I can't wait to get back to. She's 12 months old. My son Dylan just had a birthday. So my daughter Tessie turned 5. There's been a lot going on in this case. Any other questions?
I apologize if I'm not using my Nigerian accent tonight. I just wanted to wish my brother luck tonight in his boxing match, and Nigerian American lives matter.
Anything about the verdict, Ola?
Ola, what was it like to see Jussie lying like that?
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
And of course, we will continue our coverage right here on Live Now from Fox. I want to go out to Fox 32 Chicago that continues their coverage right now.
Brothers, or was it Jussie Smollett? And in this case, the jury found it was Jussie Smollett, and the Osendero brothers have essentially had their names cleared by this verdict.
Got it. And we are awaiting the Smollett camp to have something to say. Apparently, they will be coming up to that microphone in just a few minutes, give their reaction, their response to what we saw today. And Larry, if we can go back to some analysis we had earlier from you in terms of what we can expect to happen from this point forward from the Smollett camp, what they might do at this point.
Well, they will start with an immediate motion in front of it. First, you go back to the same judge who just heard the case and you ask for a new trial, and you cite all the reasons why you thought this trial was unfair and that the defendant did not get a fair trial. Those are almost always denied because it's going right back to the same judge who presided over the case. After that, there will be a sentencing, probably within a couple of months. That between now and that sentencing, there will be a sentence investigation, and Smollett's relatives and friends and others may be interviewed. He's got no prior criminal history to analyze it. All of that will be presented to the judge, which will then be outlined at sentencing, and the judge will decide upon a sentence. At the sentencing hearing, Smollett himself will have the opportunity to testify if he chooses. Dan Webb already pointed out that at the sentencing hearing, he plans to point out that Smollett lied on the witness stand, essentially committed perjury on the witness stand, and that will be considered by the judge in sentencing. So after Smollett is heard, after the lawyers are heard, the sentence will be handed down, most likely to be probation. The maximum would be 3 years, but as a first-time offender was consistently showed up for a trial and is not any sort of risk or endangerment to the public, he's likely to get probation. And meanwhile, the appeals will continue. And as I said earlier, the appeals will involve an effort to show that this judge was biased and that his bias came across to the jury against Jussie Smollett, and they'll try and ask for a new trial and have this verdict thrown out.
But Larry, is that common that they go after perjury charges? Because Jussie Smollett will say that he did not lie. And I know he's been convicted. So is that common?
It's very, very uncommon, as Dan Webb pointed out, because defendants are given a good deal of leeway to make their case, to defend themselves in court, and the fact that there may be some lies in their testimony. Usually if they're convicted, there's no reason to then try and pile on with a perjury charge. The only instance where it seems to happen occasionally is if a police officer is found to have perjured himself on the witness stand, not when the police officer is necessarily a defendant, but if a police officer testifies as part of a prosecution or defense case and then it's clearly found to be perjury. They are public employees with a sworn duty to tell the truth, and their perjury will sometimes be prosecuted.
Got it. We are still awaiting word from the Jussie Smollett attorneys and see what they have to say about what transpired today. Again, if you're just joining us, Jussie Smollett, the 39-year-old former actor on the Empire series, has been found guilty of 5 of the 6 counts of disorderly conduct as it relates to lying about the fake hate crime. So, Larry, as we look at the big picture here, it's just still one of the unknowns is just if you go back and you assume the jury got it right, what really happened there? What is this? I mean, not that you have the answer, we have the answer right now, but isn't that the $64 million question now? Like, what the heck was going on there, and what was he trying to accomplish?
Well, according to, if the prosecution's theory is correct, and it was apparently believed by the jury, what happened was that Jussie Smollett had received a piece of hate mail and he felt threatened by that hate mail, the single letter that he received, and he apparently wanted, this was the theory of the prosecution, he wanted the producers of Empire and others who worked on the set with him or others who supervised the production to provide some security for him because he felt threatened. And apparently they did not respond sufficiently. And as a result, he said, well, I'm going to make this look a little more serious, and I'm going to pay two guys for their efforts to attack me in the middle of the night, make it look like a hate crime, wear the MAGA hats, shout some racial epithets, get some rope as a noose. He paid them with a check for $3,500, tried to cover the purpose of the check by suggesting it was for some physical training that was coming up. And they went out, they purchased the rope, they purchased the hats, I guess, they purchased everything they needed to attack him. And they, the day before or shortly before, they drove around the block several times and laid out exactly what was going to happen and staged an attack. Then the police were later called. There was I believe it was his manager who called the police, Jussie Smollett's manager, that Smollett, one of the things that lent credibility to his story was that he did not want to call the police that night. He did not want the publicity, but somebody called the police and led to police arriving. And if you remember originally, everybody, all of us reported it, that Jussie Smollett had been attacked. And that had been attacked, and it took a while for the facts to change and come around to the fact that maybe this had been staged.
All right. Larry Ellen, boy, thanks for your analysis and insights. Larry Ellen on the scene for us today, and he has been now for a week and a half.
And Cook County State's Fox released a statement. We'll read it again. She says the jury can, while this case has garnered a lot of attention, we hope as a county we can move forward. At the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, we will continue to focus on the important work of this office, prioritizing and prosecuting violent crime. All right, let's check back in with Dane Placco, who is live at the Layton Criminal Court building with Casey Cronus, who has been in the courtroom. Dane.
Yeah, and we're waiting for the defense team to come down. Nyenye Uche, the lead defense attorney for Jussie Smollett, has still not made his appearance. We're told that he is going to speak. And we just heard from Gloria Rodriguez, the attorney for the Osundaro brothers. We were hoping to hear from Ola Osundaro, who is here. He spoke only briefly, and you took notes as to what he said.
Yeah, it was very brief. All he said was he wished his brother Bola, who we heard lengthy testimony from last week, he wished him luck in a fight, a boxing match that he's in tonight in Louisiana. His attorney said that he was in one last night. All his brother said was he wished him luck, and he said, quote, Nigerian lives matter. That's all he had to say. He did not respond when asked about the verdict.
And his boxing acumen actually came to the fore during the trial because Dan Webb pointed out that he is one of the best amateur-ranked boxers in the country right now, and that if he had actually been serious about attacking Jussie Smollett, he could have done a lot more damage than just a little bit of scratch on the nose.
Yeah, that's right. And we heard from the doctor, of course, who treated Jussie Smollett during the trial here, and he said that those injuries were not very sufficient, were not very deep, those injuries that he sustained. Jussie, on the other hand, arguing that he did suffer injuries and said he still has a scar on his under his left eye. So,
well, we haven't seen the jurors either. They have been coming out the front entrance during the course of the trial, and as we were reporting earlier, Judge Lynn has instructed them not to speak to the media on the side. Oh, now we're going to turn the camera around here. We're getting some indication that possibly the defense team or possibly other individuals involved with the trial will be coming down here in the next couple of moments.
Yeah, back to the jury. They were, we believe, taken out potentially a different exit. They were told, as Dane mentioned, not to speak to the media until they were in their cars off the property here. So they were ahead of me as I left the courtroom. I was asked to stop for a moment to allow the jurors to exit, and they did not use the main elevators as the rest of us did.
It was interesting. I think I asked the question of Dan Webb, did he think there was any particular evidence that swung the jury in their favor? And he said he pointed out a couple things. One of them, the rope.
Going live right here. Let's listen right here on Live Now from Fox.
Okay. Okay. Obviously, we've heard the jury's verdict. We respect the judiciary. We respect the trial by jury process, so we're not going to criticize that. We're obviously very disappointed. We obviously respectfully disagree with the jury's verdict. The verdict is inconsistent. You cannot say Jussie is lying and Jussie is not lying for the same exact incidents. So we feel 100% confident that this case will be won on appeal. Unfortunately, that's not the route we wanted, but sometimes that's the route that you have to take to win, especially a case where we remain 100% confident in our client's innocence. From the first day of this case, his case has been prejudged, his case has been tried in the media, and it's unfortunate. This is the United States of America. We live in a constitutional democracy where everyone is presumed innocent. But obviously, if we're being honest, that hasn't been the case. In social media, in the media, he's been tried and convicted before his day in court. But we are confident in our appellate system, we're confident in our Illinois Supreme Court, and we're confident that at the end of the day, what's out there in the news media and in the gossip forums are not going to stand a chance in court. Mr. Smollett said he was attacked. He gave a description of his attackers. And what a lot of people don't know is a witness came to court, and I'm not going to say his name for privacy reasons, and testified to the exact same thing. This witness was a security guard that knew nothing of this case, didn't know Mr. Smollett, but recounted and corroborated his account of events. It's pretty disappointing what happened, but we remain confident that we're going to come back and he's going to be vindicated. Questions?
Lawyer Rodriguez is just out here.
Yes.
Jussie Smollett, he's still going to be his mother's son, but to come clean. What is your response to that?
Obviously, that's ridiculous. We believe, we remain confident, and on appeal, he's going to be cleared of all accusations on all charges. Again, I think everyone needs to focus on the fact that this is an inconsistent verdict. You cannot, everything stems from one incident. Jussie was not accused of doing two different things, and he was accused of doing one thing and charged multiple times for the same incident. A jury cannot come out and say guilty of lying, but not guilty of lying. It doesn't make sense. But again, we respect the judicial process. We respect the jury process. Well, we feel confident we'll be back here. There was so much doubt in this case, and doubt because he is absolutely 100% innocent. Any other question?
To be clear, you do plan to appeal the conviction?
Oh, 100%.
AJ, for those people who say this has gone on long enough,
yes.
This has cost taxpayers too much, why keep going through with this with an appeal? What do you say to that?
Well, obviously, easy for them to say. If you're being convicted of something that you did not do, why wouldn't you want to appeal? That's why we have appellate courts. But let's talk about that. This is a Class 4 felony case. They've spent millions of dollars prosecuting this case. I'm not saying that no case should be taken seriously, but they've spent millions of dollars. We had the first black female prosecutor elected into Cook County as a state's attorney, and she was second guessed, Kim Foxx. She made an executive decision, and she decided not to prosecute this case, and she was second guessed, and someone was appointed to prosecute it. So the question has to be asked, why was so much money and resources spent re-prosecuting this case when we have thousands and thousands of people dying, hundreds of people dying in Chicago from gun violence? Why aren't resources being diverted to those situations? We have drug cases, people dying in the suburbs of drug overdose. Why aren't resources being focused on that? Why is everyone so focused on, Jussie Smollett allegedly called the police and made a false report, even though obviously we 100% stand firm, that he didn't do that. But the question has to be asked. It's not on Jussie it's not on anyone to say, Mr. Smollett, you shouldn't waste resources by pursuing this case any further. Of course he should, because that's his guilt and innocence on the line, and we believe he's innocent. But the question should be asked is, why are they spending resources focused on this type of a case? Next question.
Web work for free, so how are you aligning that to they spend millions of dollars in resources?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
The Webb's office worked pro bono.
You see, I'm not going to comment on...
But you're saying they spent millions of dollars in prosecuting, in the prosecution here. And
okay.
No,
that's fine. Have you seen the invoice?
What?
Have you seen any invoice?
Seen the invoice.
Okay, so we all know, I mean, those that have been following this case, you're supposed to, there are supposed to be filings for invoices. I haven't seen one yet. I'm sure there'll be one at some point in time. But this is based on the math we've done. We've talked that we came on this case in February. We're talking to the previous attorneys and the legal team. It's obvious a case like this. Look at all of you here. It didn't cost. It's not a situation where this costs $1 to prosecute. Next question.
What has Jussie told you since the verdict was read aloud?
You see, he's disappointed, but he remains confident. He's 100% confident that this will be reversed on appeal, and we remain confident. That's why we live in the #1 constitutional democracy. Regardless of what people are saying out there, people who are not lawyers, people who are not in court, people commenting and giving their ideas from 30,000, above sea level when they're not in court. At the end of the day, we believe justice will prevail. We don't believe it was done today, but we're very confident that he will be cleared and he will be found to be innocent.
Did Jussie tell you that he wants you to appeal the conviction? Did he ask you that after court today?
Obviously, I'm not going to discuss, attorney-client privilege with my client, but what I will tell you is, absolutely, we're planning on filing an appeal on this case.
Did you get a fair hearing in court?
I'm sorry?
Did you get a fair hearing in court?
I'm going to reserve my comments on that. Obviously, I plead the fifth. How about that? Next question.
Separate from the appeal, are you confident he'll get probation, no prison time?
Obviously, again, this is a class 4 felony. It's right above a misdemeanor. From my historical perspective, I used to be a prosecutor in this courthouse, and I think everybody here, we're all former prosecutors. I've never seen a case like this where a person got jail time. And he shouldn't, because he's innocent. Next question. Any other question?
Describe in the courtroom, when you were there,
yes.
It was really contentious at times for you guys, the judge, both sides. What was the environment like over the course of this trial, and are you confident you got the case? I'll put it to you this way. It was a very unusual proceeding. I've handled homicide type cases. I have never felt this, gone through the emotional roller coaster we went through in this here. And I think that's the most diplomatic thing I would say. But I don't for 1 second believe that justice was done today, and that's my opinion. Okay?
He should have been, because it was a minor crime, the police shouldn't have investigated it so hard. I mean, it was a big deal in the city, what he was saying about the city,
Correct.
racism and stuff.
Correct. Well, I wouldn't say, obviously everyone wants police officers to investigate crime, right? I'm not going to stand here and say they shouldn't, but what you need to remember is this is an innocent man. And also, there was a lot that was said in court. The jury got to hear that no one has ever heard before. We have the case of a security officer who saw the exact same thing that Mr. Smollett saw. There's a lot of misstatements put out there. Mr. Smollett said he saw 2 MAGA hat wearing people run away. Well, we found out in court that never happened. Mr. Smollett said that he saw someone with pale skin between a ski mask. Well, we found out in court that an independent witness confirmed what he said. And so, I hope and I'm confident in our appellate court that we'll get a fair result there.
On what basis? Why did you have the woman who claimed she saw the man running with the rope? Why did you have her testify?
I'm sorry?
The woman who claimed she saw a man running with the rope.
Yes.
Why did you have her testify?
A lot of stuff happened in this trial, and I'll just ask you to, Matt, you were in court every day. I watched some of your updates. I will ask you to go back and listen carefully to what some of the witnesses were saying, and that's what I'll put in terms of, how some of them felt on the witness stand. I'll leave it to you that way.
Is there a reason Frank Gadsden didn't testify?
I mean, Frank Gadsden is his own person. You can only ask people to come to court. Sometimes you can't force them out of state. Well, we're not going to go into legal strategy at this time. Okay? No, he's not planning to speak. And let's be real. Let's be human beings here. He's a human being. He's disappointed. But I will tell you this. I am very proud of him. I'm very, very proud of him. He's holding up very strong. He's committed to clearing his name, and he is 100% confident that he's going to get cleared by our appellate court. And I feel there's so many issues with this case, and for those reporters who've been following this case, nothing I'm saying here should be surprising. This case is seriously flawed. From the initial inception. I mean, should a special prosecutor have been appointed? The answer is, from our perspective, absolutely not. You know, and so that's our position in this particular issue. Yes. 3 more questions, please.
Special Prosecutor Webb said Mr. Smollett would not have lost this case unless the jury thought he lied to them.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm not going to compare things, but historically, just because of a jury, just because a jury says gives a verdict doesn't mean it's the right one. You know, we respect the jury system, but that's why we have appeals. I mean, if we accepted everything a jury did, we wouldn't have an appellate court, would we now? Okay. 2 more questions.
In terms of who actually attacked him, on
Yes.
the stand, Jussie told Mr. Webb that he wasn't sure whether the brothers were the actual culprits. Who does he believe are the actual culprits? Are they still out there? Can you give some shape to that? That's one thing that Mr. Webb then used in his closing to suggest that he was lying.
Okay, so you know, this case, you have access to the transcripts. This case is, here's what I'll say on this issue. How is he supposed to know who attacked him? He's not a police department. He's not the Chicago Police. He's not the Chicago Detective Bureau, right? He's not supposed to know. They need to do, guys, when you look at the transcripts and you focus in on some of the detectives' testimony, you realize that a quality investigation was never carried out. That's our position. There was a lot of quantity to it, 3,000 hours of police manpower spent, but where was the quality? You had witnesses that were never interviewed. We had to bring in the security guard who corroborated everything Jussie said into court. Nobody brought him in. The prosecution team did not. And so you have to understand, unfortunately, we were facing an uphill battle where Jussie was already tried and convicted in the media, and then we had to somehow get the jury to forget or unsee all the news stories they had been hearing that were negative for the last 3 years. So that's difficult. So at the end of the day, you have access to multiple witnesses that you can go interview. My father was a professor of journalism. You can conduct your investigative journalism and go find his witnesses. Frank Gadsden, you mentioned him. Go find him. Go talk to him. The other 2, I don't want to mention their names for privacy reasons, but go talk to these people, right? Because Chicago Police, it's our position, should have investigated this case much more thoroughly. Okay? Last question, please.
What do you think the grounds for appeal are? Where do you think
we will be here for 10 hours if I start listing the grounds of appeal. We will be here for a long time, you know, and I'm not going to go through that now. I think I'll save that for my legal brief. Okay? Thank you so much, and God bless everyone.
Defense team there for Jussie Smollett.